Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. Well, we're gripped firmly in the teeth of winter here where I live. We've had 2 significant snowfalls and temperatures well below freezing for most of January. And while the fall and winter are my favorite times of the year, I don't really know anybody that enjoys temperatures 20 to 30 degrees below freezing. And the worst thing of all here is the wind. We've had wind chills of 10 to 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. That's negative 23 to negative 28 degrees Celsius. And the air here is just so dry and so raw. I think I've gone through 2 tubes of chapstick already this winter. But enough about my wintry escapades, listener. You want to know about today's book. It's the story of a young Jedi Knight lost in Sith space 1,000 years before the Skywalker saga. Kira Holt is caught in the middle of a war between a dozen Sith Lords, battling to become the one ruler of Sith space. Kira fights to free the worlds under oppression, and she teams up with a Bothan spy to sabotage one Sith after another, all while shepherding a group of refugee children to try and find a safe home. It's Knight Errant by John Jackson Miller. And I'll talk about the book coming up here in a few minutes. But first, it's listener question time. I have 2 emails today. The first comes from Chuck. Chuck says, "Hello, Aaron. I really dig your show. I listen to it while driving my semi around the Middle America corn states. It makes the boring drives around Omaha and Kansas City entertaining." Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Chuck. My question. 1. In the book Revan, Emperor Vitiate has a fun showdown at the end of the book. Does he appear in any other Star Wars literature that we can listen to? I think it was really cool how he could give Lord Scourge immortal life, but at the price of constant pain. Eventually, you will feel nothing. What a fun quote to go out on for the book. And question 2, I know you have stated that you do this as a side passion project. Do you ever profit off of your program? If not, you should. It's great background entertainment. Well, thank you very much for the questions, Chuck. So I looked it up. According to Wikipedia, Emperor Vitiate, or Tenebrae, is only shown in 2 written works. The Old Republic novel Revan, that you talked about in your question, and in the webcomic Star Wars, The Old Republic, Blood of the Empire, Act 1, Shades of the Sith. That is quite a mouthful. Now, besides that, the only place that Vitiate is really shown is in the Star Wars, The Old Republic online role-playing game, the large MMO that has been going on for more than a decade now. Actually, it's probably closing in on 2 decades. Now, as to your second question, Chuck, I really have no plans to monetize the podcast. I don't want to set up a Patreon and have people pay me a few dollars a month because I really don't have the time to create additional content for patrons. And I definitely don't have the time or the knowledge to create and sell merchandise for this show. I do make a small amount of money off of the podcast every month from the commercials you hear at the beginning and in the middle of each episode. It's about $25 to $30 a month, usually enough to get me about 3/4 of a tank of gas. And that depends on the number of downloads each month. But that's enough for me. Today's second email comes from Luke, who says, "I recently listened to Republic Commando Hard Contact with you and Kat. I wasn't aware that you liked the clones. I love them too. What is your favorite clone legion? I love the 332nd Company." Well, Luke, for me, it's Anakin's 501st. Luke continues, Who is your favorite named clone? Mine is Fives. I love his arc in the Clone Wars and how Count Dooku and the Kaminoans try to prevent the Jedi from learning about the inhibitor chip when Tup shoots his Jedi leader because his chip malfunctions, causing him to execute Order 66 prematurely. That's a great call, Luke. I don't know if I can narrow it down to just one clone that's my favorite, so I'll say my favorite usually rotates between three of them, and it's three of the more well-known clones. My favorite probably rotates between Rex, Fives, and Echo. Luke has another question. If Grand Admiral Thrawn, Grand Moff Tarkin, and Admiral Akbar were in a three-way fight with the equal number of ships at their disposal, who would win? Obviously, Thrawn and Tarkin would have Imperial ships, while Akbar would have the Rebel equivalent. Out of these three, who do you think is the smartest and most strategic leader? Many people would say Thrawn is on the top, but I think Grand Moff Tarkin is better than Grand Admiral Thrawn. Tarkin fought with Anakin in the Clone Wars, so he has more battle experience than Thrawn and Akbar. Also, Tarkin is as high up in the Imperial chain of command as you can get, second only to Vader himself. You don't get into a position of that much power by losing fights and screwing up. Also, if you remember, Thrawn lost Lothal in the last episode of Star Wars Rebels. What are your thoughts? Well, Luke, this is one of those questions where the answer is any one of the three could beat the others in a battle. Now, that depends on what happens during the fighting. So, there's an old adage that says, in war, everyone has a plan until the shooting starts, which means that once the fighting begins, there are so many different variables that no commander's plan is foolproof. You're at the mercy of the decisions your subordinates make. And then you have to adapt your battle plan based upon the hundreds of factors that constantly change during the chaos. So if you're asking me which of the three commanders is the smartest military tactician, I think it's Thrawn. If you're asking me which of the three commanders seems the most adaptable from what we've seen on the screen, I would say that's Admiral Akbar. And if you're asking which is the smartest leader when it comes to understanding the psychology of warfare, both within the military and in the civilian population, and who can play politics the best, I would say that's Grand Moff Tarkin. Thus, any one of the three could win a battle with the other two, depending on the situations that arise during that battle. Thanks again for the questions, Chuck and Luke. Now, listener, if you'd like to get in touch with the podcast to ask a question or to give your opinion on something, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in, but please remember, record it in MP3 audio format. Now, we'll hear from Luke again coming up at the end of the show. He disagrees with some of my opinions during a discussion I had last year with one of my guests. But for now, it's time to talk about today's book, Knight Errant by John Jackson Miller. Grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins on the planet Darknell. Jedi Knight Kira Holt is deep undercover. Kira is the only surviving member of a strike team led by Jedi Master Vanner Treese that infiltrated Sith space in hopes of freeing its people. Master Treese was killed by Lord Odion on the planet Chiloa, and the rest of the strike team died in an explosion during the battle. Kira escaped Chiloa and fled Odion's territory, ending up on Darknell, the throne world of Odion's brother, Lord Daemon. Kira works in one of Daemon's manufacturing plants at night and tutors a young Celestin girl named Tan during the day. One night, Kira skips work to investigate Damon's dynamic testing facility, hoping to sabotage the Sith Lord's military operations. As Kira sneaks across the roof of the building, she discovers a Bothan spy named Narsk. Narsk works for Odian. He's been hired to destroy a new starship that Damon is building. Kira gets the jump on Narsk and learns that the Bothan has planted explosives throughout the facility. She knocks out the spy, steals the stealth suit he's wearing, and uses his remote detonator to blow the facility. Kira then dumps Narsk, still alive, in a garbage bin and leaves. When she returns home to the Celestin family's home where she's been staying, Kira learns that Tan is leaving. She's been selected by a corporate research facility by another Sith Lord, Bactra. It turns out Damon and Bactra have a deal. Damon allows Bactra to recruit the most promising students from the planets within his territory in exchange for Bactra sharing the students' research with Damon. Damon plans to allow Bactra to pick up the students on the planet Gadzari. But Kira learns it's a trap. Damon is using the exchange to lure his brother Odian to Gadzari to kill him. Damon stages hundreds of his troops and several mercenaries at Gadzari for the ambush. Kira uses the stealth suit to sneak aboard Damon's capital ship, hoping to assassinate him before they arrive at Gadzari. But, try as she may, Kira can't find Damon, and a few days later, they arrive on the planet. Now Kira sneaks off the ship and finds out the exchange of the students is going to take place in a valley surrounded by a high ridge. Damon's troops and the mercenaries are hiding out on the ridge overlooking the landing zone. Kira watches as Tan and hundreds of students make their way toward Bactra's ships when Odian's fleet arrives and Damon springs the trap. Fire erupts across the valley. Turbo lasers rain from the sky, and they're answered by the troops on the ridge. And Kira watches, terrified, as Tan and the students are caught in the middle. Quickly, she jumps one of Damon's mercenaries and steals his speeder. She races down the ridge, grabs Tan, and starts herding the students out of the middle of the war zone. She leads them towards one of the other mercenaries, a man named Jero Rusher. Rusher just lost most of his forces, and he's retreating with those that are left. Kira pleads with Rusher to take the students, and after a brief argument, he relents. Rusher lifts off with Kira and the students aboard. As the mercenary ship leaves orbit, Kira and Rusher see something strange. Odian and Damon's forces just stop shooting at each other. Both forces turn and fire on Bactra's fleet, destroying it. Confused and terrified, Kira, Rusher, and the refugees jump to hyperspace and flee Damon's territory. After jumping around for a few weeks looking for a safe space for the refugees, Rusher and Kira end up on the planet Bylura. It's the main planet of the Sith twins, Quillen and Dromica. Quillen is a mentally challenged teen with tremendous farsight. He can see visions of the future more clearly than any of the other Sith Lords. But Quillen doesn't speak. His sister, Dromica, is the voice of the diarchy. She possesses intense hypnotic abilities, and she's the one person that can keep Quillen calm. When Rusher's ship lands in the capital city of Hestabil, Kira does some reconnaissance and finds it's pretty peaceful. Everything seems to be running smoothly. People are going to work, the transports are running on time, but as peaceful as it seems, something is just a little off. Kira tries to speak to a few people, but they don't really answer her. They're just focused on going to work or going home. Kira uses the Force to search the mind of one of the people and discovers it's being manipulated. In fact, they're all being manipulated. Quillen and Dromica have taken over the minds of every person Kira encounters. Immediately, she calls Rusher and orders him not to allow the students off the ship. But just then, Kira is discovered by the Sith that set up this society, a Kravaki named Saj Kalishan, who takes Kira to where he's keeping the twins. Once there, Kalishan jumps Kira, pinning her down. Dramaka orders Kalishan to kill the Jedi, but Kalishan fights back against Dramaka's hypnotic suggestions. He wants to fight the Jedi on his own. It turns out that while Kalishan set up the system on Bylura to use the twins to control the planet, they turned the tables and began controlling him too. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kira breaks free, ignites her lightsaber, and slices off one of Kalishan's tentacles. She grabs Quillen and escapes with him back to Rusher's ship. They leave Bylura as another fleet arrives, this one from Lord Arcadia, the older sister of Quillen and Dramaka. Arcadia catches Rusher's ship in a tractor beam and transports it to her icy throne world, Syned. On Syned, Lord Arcadia tells Kira and Rusher she wants to take in the student refugees and continue their education. But what kind of education is that? A little bit of everything, Arcadia says. Every person on Syned receives a well-rounded education. Now that sounds great, but Kira quickly learns that people don't stay in the same position for more than a short time. A chemist today is a tour guide next month, and a battalion commander 6 months after that. It's a system that keeps everyone on their toes, and with people unable to become experts in certain subjects, they can't become threats to Arcadia. When Kira confronts her, the Sith Lord invites the Jedi to listen in on a secret hologram call with the other Sith Lords, called the Bequest. The call is run by Arcadia's grandmother, Villia Calamandra. It turns out, Villia is the puppet master of all the Sith in the Grumani sector. From the hiding space that Arcadia put her, Kira watches as Villia divides up Bactra's planets and businesses that were conquered weeks ago by Daemon and Odian between the brothers. It's all a game, Arcadia tells Kira. It's a contest called the Charge Matrica to determine who will be the heir to all of Villia's power and territory. The genius of it, Arcadia says, is that it keeps all the Sith fighting with each other and not focusing on her grandmother, the real power in Sith space. Before the end of the holocall, Arcadia tells Villia that she now has custody of her brother Quillen. The news seems to surprise her grandmother, who asks Arcadia to send Quillen to her so she can care for the troubled boy. Arcadia agrees, and after the bequest ends, she tells Kira that she has a plan. Arcadia will let the refugees live on Syned peacefully if the Jedi, undercover, delivers Quillen to Villia and kills her. Arcadia will hide a nerve gas in Quillen's hover chair. After Kira drops off Quillen and leaves whatever world Villia is currently hiding on, she will set off the gas, killing Villia and Quillen both. Arcadia's plan horrifies Kira. This is her grandmother and her brother. She refuses, and Arcadia immediately has Kira taken into custody. But she's freed by Narsk. It turns out the Bothan spy has been working for Villia Calamandra all along, and Villia is fine with Kira moving around Sith space, causing problems for her grandchildren. She's another distraction to keep them from focusing on the Dowager Empress herself. Now, once free, Kira heads off to confront Arcadia, while Narsk tells Rusher to attack the city. Kira finds the Sith Lord in her museum. They ignite their lightsabers and fight beneath the museum dome. In the middle of the duel, Rusher orders his ship to fire on the dome. It collapses, allowing Kira to escape. She and Rusher take off, leaving Syned with the refugees. They flee to Republic space, thanks to Narsk's help. The Bothan spy supplies them with coordinates for a hyperspace route out of the Gormandi sector and Sith territory. The story ends with Narsk delivering Quillen to Villa Calamandra. The Dowager Empress says she knew Arcadia was scheming to kill her all along, and she approves. It's what a good Sith Lord would do. But now that her assassination attempt has failed, and since she lost the Jedi, Villia says that her granddaughter will be forced to get back in line, at least for a while. It's time to take a break. When we return, I'll talk more about Knight Errant and Kira Holt's wanderings throughout the Gormandi sector. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Thrawn is a story full of smugglers, pirates, and political infighting. See how the brilliant Chiss tactician climbed his way up the ranks of the Imperial Navy, with a little help from his reluctant aide, Eli Vanto. Check out Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about the novel Knight Errant by John Jackson Miller. So this is 2 episodes in a row where I've talked about a novel that really is just a story that's a part of a larger publishing initiative, and the vast majority of that publishing takes place in comics. Last episode, it was Dawn of the Jedi, Into the Void by Tim Leben. And I said, while the story was interesting, I had a hard time getting fully invested without knowing more from the comics, because it seemed like a good amount of information that we received in that book, you kind of had to have a working knowledge of what else was happening in the Tython system from the Dawn of the Jedi comics. For me, this book, Knight Errant, was the opposite. I understand the story of Kira Holt is told in quite a number of comics, a large comic run, and I haven't read any of them. But I found this book fully engrossing. It was split into 3 parts. Part 1 was called The Daemonate, when Kira is in Lord Daemon's territory. The second part, which admittedly was the shortest, was called The Diarchy, when Kira was in Lord Quillen and Lord Dromica's territory. And the final part was called The Acadianate, when Kira was in Lord Arcadia's territory. And each of those 3 parts in the book, to me, read like an arc in comic books. That the Daemonate could take place over 4 to 6 issues of a comic run. Same with the Diarchy. Same with the Arcadianate. And that really worked for me. The story moved. For Dawn of the Jedi, Into the Void, I don't know why it didn't feel the same to me. Maybe if it was broken up similarly to how this story was broken up, it would have. But it almost felt like the way the 2 Force Unleashed books felt to me. That it was written as a novel, but the story would have gotten me more invested in another medium. Knight Errant is just 3 stories in a novel that fit Kira Holt's story in the Knight Errant comic run. And maybe that's why it worked better for me. I feel that the story flows better than the story does in Into the Void or the 2 Force Unleashed novels. And even though that story is written out in what would be 3 comic arts, I think John Jackson Miller does an excellent job of getting me invested in the character of Kira Holt and in her mission behind enemy lines in Sith space. He gives just enough of a backstory about how Kira got here originally as part of a strike team that I understood where I was when the novel begins, why Kira is there, and what she has taken upon herself as her job, all alone against a dozen or more Sith Lords in a sector of the galaxy that encompasses dozens of planets. What can one person do when facing those sorts of odds? You can only do what you can do. And that's what Kira wrestles with in this book. What can I do? In the beginning, she thinks she needs to assassinate Daemon. She needs to bring down the Sith Lord. But then she realizes, if I do that, what is going to take Daemon's place? Most likely, it's going to be his brother Odeon, because the 2 of them have been locked in battle for years. Well, will the people of Darknell and the other planets in the Daemonate be in any better shape under Lord Odeon than they would be under Lord Daemon? At some point, Kira begins to think that they will not. And she comes to realize she can't help all of the people of Darknell. She can't help all of the people in Daemon's territory. So what can she do? Yes, she is a Jedi Knight. She has abilities that regular people do not have. She has assumed the responsibility as a Jedi Knight to protect people, to seek justice, to seek peace. One thing she realizes that she can do is she can save these student refugees. If I remember correctly, I think the book says there's about 1,200 of them. It's a large number. So while she can't save the planet Darknell, she can't save all the people on Darknell, what she can do is get these students someplace safe. So when the fighting begins between Daemon and his brother Odeon, and the students are caught at the bottom of the valley with blasters crisscrossing the sky overhead, Kira decides, I don't have to fight these 2 Sith Lords. What I have to do is get down into the valley, get the students out, and get them off this planet. That's what I can do. It's difficult. It borders on impossible, but she does it. Yes, she enlists the help of a mercenary, and at first he's not willing to give up space on his ship to help rescue these students, but eventually he relents And basically, Kira kind of hires him to help her find a safe place for these students. Now, the first thing, listener, you're going to think when you're reading the book is, okay, we've got the students off this planet. Let's just take them to Republic space. That's the first thing I thought of. But you learn as you're reading that Kira is kind of trapped in the Grumani sector. So is Rusher. They don't know of any safe hyperspace lanes to leave Sith territory. So as Rusher tells Kira over and over again, there's really no good option for where they can go. There is simply the least bad option. What they need to do is try to find a planet that is at least in a safe area, that the Sith Lord doesn't enslave their people, forcing them to work debilitating, hard labor where there's not fighting all the time. Because as we learn later in the story, these dozen or so Sith Lords who have carved out their territories in the Grumani sector are all fighting amongst themselves to take control of the entire region of space. Each of them has planets, corporations, businesses under their control. Damon has more than just the planet Dark now. Obviously, we see that he has Gritzari. So what Rusher keeps trying to suggest to Kira is they find a world controlled by an agreeable Sith Lord, one who isn't constantly neglecting or abusing the people under their rule, where the planet is far enough away from the front lines of any fighting, where the students can kind of live in peace. It's not going to be a happy life. They're probably not going to be able to realize any hopes and dreams that they have, but they can't really do that anywhere in Sith space. And unfortunately, they can't get out of Sith space. So Kira's not trying to find a great option for the students. She's just trying to find the least bad option that will allow the students to live a full life in relative peace. Sometimes that's all one person can do. That part of the story really makes the reader look inward. Basically, if the reader wants to change something about their life, they need to have a really hard look about what they can do. Sometimes you have the ability and resources to do something really, really, really big. And other times you don't have the knowledge, the resources to do something big. You can only do what you can do. Maybe what you can do, even if the thing is small, whatever you can do is enough to at least make your life just a little bit better. The way this story is written, as well as it is written, because I think this is a really well-written story. I may be a little biased. I think John Jackson Miller is one of the better authors in Legends. I know he mostly did comics, but I've only ever read the novels, and I'm basing this, of course, on what I think is one of the best novels in Legends, Kenobi. He also did The Lost Tribe of the Sith, which I think is a really fun book. And then he does Knight Errant, which is also a really fun book. But this gets me curious. I am now actually curious about the Kira Holt story. It almost makes me want to go find the Knight Errant comic run and figure out if Kira ever does make it back to the Republic. Now, she does at the very end of this book to drop off the student refugees. They find their way out. But she and Rusher go back because Kira has a job to do. And I kind of want to see more of her errant ventures throughout the Grimani sector. The one other thing that is really interesting to me in this story is the charge Madrika that Vilya Calamandra has set up, where all of the lesser Sith Lords are fighting amongst themselves to gain territory, gain power, and curry the favor of the Dowager Empress in order to become her heir. It makes me think a lot of the real world, where there are these divisions, there is all this infighting amongst people and groups in order to try to amass as much power and influence and resources as possible to either curry favor with someone who is even more powerful and wealthier than they are, or to try to gain the respect and admiration of the public at large, when in fact, if the people who are squabbling would see that a lot of the stuff they're fighting about is a little bit of a misdirection, that the things they're fighting about aren't really the important things, and if they would either decide to have serious discussions and debates about those important things, or try to find some sort of common ground on them, maybe they could see that the alliances they could make would be more beneficial in the long run for everybody than simply the small amount of people who are going to benefit from the arguments, the fighting that they are currently having. This book really did hit home for me. I enjoyed it on several different levels, much more this time reading it in 2025 than I did when I first read it back in the early 20-teens, sometime around there right after it was published. But, of course, even if you are enjoying something for the second or third time, it could hit differently depending on where you are in life. And that's what happened to me with this book. So, it's almost time to go, but before I do, let's hear from Luke again. In one of the episodes last year that I put out covering the Jedi Academy trilogy, my guest Dan and I received an email about Darth Bane. Now Luke says, in your episode with Dan covering The Dark Apprentice, your emailer, Wes, said that one of his most memorable moments in Star Wars is the fight between Bane, Zana, and the Jedi. You seemed to think that Wes was talking about the big battle at the end of the third book. I'm pretty sure Wes was talking about the fight on Tython in the second book. The fact that he mentions a temple makes it obvious, in my opinion, that this is the fight he was talking about. Secondly, I agree with Dan that Bane somehow won the duel with his apprentice, Zana. I think that he was able to hold on for a few generations, then was excised into the void by another Sith. That's why when Darth Plagueis is looking over his dead master, he remembers how Sith of the past used to have to guard against possession by a dead Sith Lord. If Bane had served that long, then Force essence transfer would be a very real thing to look out for. Well, thank you very much for your opinions, Luke. And Wes, if I did in fact make that mistake in answering your question during the Dark Apprentice episode, and I was talking about the wrong battle, I sincerely apologize. I'll try to do better in the future. Listener, if you want to contact me with a question, a comment, share a Star Wars character grouping, anything, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And I still want to see any Star Wars gifts you got over the holidays. Email me the pictures or send me a message on Blue Sky or Twitter. Now, coming up on the next episode, we jump back into the Imperial era and read the first of the Lando Calrissian adventures from the 1980s, Lando Calrissian and the Mind Harp of Sharu by L. Neil Smith. That episode is scheduled for release on February 7th. And if you want to see the full schedule for 2025, check out the posts that are pinned on my Blue Sky and Twitter pages, and you can see the entire schedule for this year. Once again, thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Errant Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in Legends.